So my original plan for this video was to just talk about Skyrim as an individual game, but when I was sort of doing my notes to sort of give an outline of what I wanted to really break down here for you guys, I realized how influential, for better or worse, that game was on Bethesda's future IPs and titles. Because we talk about from a design philosophy, Skyrim did so much, so well, but I have to add the caveat that it was for the time. I ended up picking up the game. I think I was probably 10 at the time for my birthday, and I was like a kid in a candy store when I booted it up for the first time. It was really innovative for its period because I feel like it offered a level of freedom that very few games did at the time. And its predecessor, Oblivion, which I also played when I was even younger than that, definitely had sort of elements of that. It was the first to really dip its toes into flexibility for the player from a gameplay perspective. And even though I didn't even click with Oblivion probably at the first time because I was too young, I remember dying to the rats in the tutorial section before finally really getting deep into the game a couple of years later. You could see that the proof was in the pudding, that there was elements there that Bethesda had built that no other studio had really done to that level when it comes to the NPC systems, the core RPG elements as well. I really think Oblivion was the first one to pave that trail, and Skyrim, in a lot of ways, finished it. You know, I'd like to say that it was exploration done right within Skyrim because, you know, I feel like we've almost come full circle with it because Skyrim was a game that offered you limitless freedom. After the tutorial area, when you escape Helgen and the dragons, you're essentially given free reign to go and do anything you want to do. And that's very reminiscent of more recent titles we've seen, which have, of course, garnered incredible praise and have taken on an even more stripped-back approach. I'm talking like, for all its faults, in my opinion, Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda, and something like Elden Ring, which, of course, I love as well. And, you know, that just proves how effective Skyrim was from a gameplay element because it's just influenced so many titles. And, you know, with that in mind, it's definitely one of the more jankier games. And I think that goes for most of Bethesda titles, if I'm honest, because it feels like it's held together with pieces of string and some glue. And in a lot of ways, I almost feel like it's very lovable because of that. You know, I have a lot of memories because on this channel, I always like to focus on my personal experiences and my games experiences with these games. And saying that, I feel like a universal one for anyone who's played Skyrim growing up was all of the glitches you could do to access the inventories of various vendors, blacksmiths, etc. Thinking of the Whiterun barrel jump you could use to get out of the city and then go loot the blacksmith's chest and all the various ones in Dawnstar, Solitude, and the various cities. And people might see that as a negative because, oh, it's a bug, but I'd like to take that as a positive. I like to take the optimistic side in that. And another one, like using the Greybeards at the throat of the world mountain to ice form you off the cliff and watch your ragdoll fly down the side of the mountain at 1,000,000 miles an hour and miraculously survive. You know, they used to just have me cracking up. And it's such a little, it says a lot about something where it's such a little detail like that, something very specific and in the grand scheme of the game, insignificant. Yeah, I remember it fondly and far more than many big blockbuster moments in AAA titles that, you know, we can play today. And obviously looking forward post-launch, the expansions really just kept the momentum going. Dawnguard I absolutely loved for its, you know, art direction and general boldness. I think it was very tonally different from the base game, and I love the sort of moral dilemma you had between the Vampire Lords and the Dawnguard, who of course were very much against them. And younger me trying to decide where I wanted to bite the bullet and become a Vampire Lord, but it was because it was really fucking cool, or just stay a werewolf. And yeah, that was always a good time. And, you know, some of the other DLCs, particularly the second one, I can't remember what it was called, the house building one, perhaps not as well received, but of course they finished strong with the Dragonborn one, which of course opened up Solstheim and, you know, really a whole new area of the map. And I think the great thing about Skyrim, which of course everyone knows, is because of the modding community. And that just gave a breath of new fresh air and just kept it, Skyrim really gave it an infinite life in a lot of ways because fans were so just determined to innovate and keep building on the systems that were already there. Even now, years later, you know, I think it's 14 years since Skyrim first released, and we are still getting incredible new expansions and experiences built by teams. I mean, the biggest one I can think of coming up is it Oblivion Reborn or something like that. They are recreating the entirety of Oblivion within Skyrim, which is blowing my mind. And I think that's set to release this or next year, which I'm very excited for. And I think the only downside, or one of the few downsides to a game like Skyrim, and I hesitate to be negative on this channel because I said I like to be positive. I like to talk about, the great experiences I've had with them. But I feel like it's okay to criticize a game that you absolutely love. And the Skyrim was so influential for its time, and it did a lot of things so well that I almost feel like Bethesda became stuck in their ways as a result. They were so afraid of moving away from the status quo, moving away from the formula that had worked well for them for so long. Because Skyrim had maintained a very passionate fan base for years, and it never really dropped player count below like a large amount. So it would always done well. And I think that it's proof there that Skyrim is a damn good game. I mean, I don't need to tell you that. But I think as a result of that, with the constant re-releases and remasters of it onto various platforms, which is almost a running joke at this point, we saw the knock-on effect into Bethesda's future IPs. I look at Fallout 4 probably to a lesser degree with that because, like tonally and just from an art direction perspective, it's a completely different experience. But the core systems, gameplay-wise, are very much the same as Skyrim, as they always had been. But I think the most egregious one, excluding Fallout 76, which I'm not even going to delve into, is of course Starfield, a game which I had a lot of high hopes for because we heard things that the Creation Engine was essentially being redone as Creation Engine 2, which was their own in-house engine, which is what they built all their games on for years. So that gave me a bit of cautious optimism that we'd see some innovation from a design perspective. And it's such a shame because Starfield had so much potential, and Todd Howard, the helmsman of the Bethesda titles, always said Starfield was the game he wanted to make for 25 years. And it's strange because when that came out a year or two ago, I didn't really see any of that. What I saw was a game with beautiful art direction, this lovely analog sci-fi feel, within every asset, which I thought was really cool. I loved it, particularly the shipbuilding element. Your ship felt very personable and grounded as well, because as I said, the analog feel, it didn't feel weightless. Everything felt tactile and looked responsive. I loved it. And that's one of the few positives I can say about Starfield, because the reality is, from a gameplay perspective, it is essentially Skyrim with a sci-fi sleeve on and just done worse. And, when I was playing it, and even through Fallout 4 as well, years before that, I kept thinking, I don't know if my tastes were changing as I got older, or the design philosophy just became very much outdated. And after playing Starfield, I definitely realized it was the latter, because the same pitfalls and problems, which were kind of taken, at face value, they weren't really, criticized as much back in 2011, and rightfully so. And now, rightfully so as well, massively criticized, stuff like the loading screens just for going into one room. In comparison to games, AAA games of the modern era now, we've got, I have to praise a game like Cyberpunk for all of its faults at launch. Its loading times, there's only one loading screen in that entire game when you boot up the game, and that's it. It's when you load in for the first time. After that, there's not a single loading screen. And I can think of many other titles that do the very same, stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2. Starfield has none of that. And, you'd think, okay, we can make some sacrifices there, that the other elements of the game will be much better. The reality is they aren't. It's a game, exploration-wise, which is in complete contrast to Skyrim and goes against everything that game stands for. When Todd Howard first showed it off at the Xbox showcase a couple years back, they were saying how they have 1,000 full-size planets that you can fully explore. And it's like, wow, that sounds great. But the more you think about it, Starfield is a game that is wide as an ocean and deep as a puddle. I think that's the perfect way to describe it. Whilst Skyrim is a nice, healthy-sized pool with perfect amount of depth and width and length, Starfield is absolutely none of that, which is such a shame. And again, I have to reiterate, I don't really want to be negative here. These criticisms come from a place of love because I want Bethesda to do well, but you have to understand, I really love the Elder Scrolls series. And of course, we still are waiting on Elder Scrolls 6 to even be revealed outside of that first teaser, which we had. It must have been closing on 10 years ago now, which is absurd to say. I think the only real solution to that, where we see the light at the end of the tunnel, we see a good game at the end of it, is to gut the fish entirely, you know, for lack of a better term. I think the reality is that to find innovation, you know, you need drastic change, particularly in the games industry that's evolving all the time. It's very difficult to innovate because a lot of developers, as I said, like Bethesda here, have fallen back on the safe option, whether that's remasters, remakes, sequels, and within those sequels, it is the same reiterated game systems. And I can only hope that with Elder Scrolls 6, we see a new engine entirely. And I doubt Bethesda will do that. That's more the optimistic side of me holding out hope. But, you know, Skyrim, Oblivion, and for all their faults, the Fallout games as well, 3 and 4, they hold a very special place in my heart. And I hold a lot of memories with them. So, you know, this all comes from a place of love. I really hope that Bethesda strike gold with Elder Scrolls 6. I'm going to cross my fingers and hold out hope. But if you somehow haven't played Skyrim by now, or any of the Bethesda titles, even though they are dated from a visual and gameplay perspective, they hold up pretty well. They are just damn fun to play. Skyrim in particular is a game that is a sum of its parts. They may not all be perfect, but put together, whether it's through string and glue, it doesn't matter. The game is fun to play when all is said and done. So go check it out. I really appreciate you all tuning in and listening to my weekly, or sometimes 2 weekly or bi-weekly, not even bi-weekly, fortnightly rambles on games that I love and adore for various reasons. And I hope to see you again back here pretty soon. Stay safe. Have a good one.